Welcome. You're listening to the University of Akron Marketing Podcast, sponsored by S3 Technologies.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Taylor Blueprint. I'm of course your host, Shaden Hughes, and today I'm joined by someone whose career has had a major impact on creative and in the marketing world, Bill Fritsch. From launching new ventures at Disney to leading innovative agencies to mentoring the next generation of leaders, Bill's journey is full of lessons in creativity, growth, and leadership. Bill, thank you so much for being here. To start us off, can you take us back to the beginning of your career? What inspired you to get to this space, and what were those early days like?
Oh my, do we have 4 hours? That would be, so I graduated from the University of Akron long time ago, very long time ago, and had not the foggiest idea where I wanted to go in life. Had a degree in accounting and went off to work for a giant CPA firm. And day by day, I realized my mind was not on that work. And I really did not enjoy it at all. I was out in a bank vault one day. It was my first revelation. And I was it was an inventory of cash. I was supposed to count all this money. And so I'm counting and counting. 2-3 hours into it, and all of a sudden I realize I'm daydreaming about the value of the actual physical cash, which is just paper with some ink on it, and how the only reason it's millions of dollars is because we think it's millions of dollars. And I had to redo all my counting of the cash. And it was a revelation, which is I have a conceptual mind, not a concrete mind. And a conceptual mind, I live in daydreams. I see things, and then I combine this with this and this, and it's always trying to improve things. So I realized I'm miserable and I need to change careers, and I won't tell the full story, but I went to work for the Smithers Company in Hudson, Ohio, and they brought in a consultant who had worked for Walt Disney, the man, Walt. So this is a very long time ago. The fellow's name was Mike Vance. And he gave a full day talk on all the principles that built Disneyland. And I was so inspired. It was an amazing revelation, number 2, that there's another world out there where people start projects not with tasks and do this and a boss says do that, but rather a lot of time spent imagining what could be. And so that kind of really clicked with this revelation that I have a conceptual mind. And a couple weeks later, my young wife and I are all packed up and heading to California. I'm going to go work for Walt Disney. We had $300 in the bank. And so that was the first chapter of that career, and we'll probably talk more about it.
How did the opportunity at Walt Disney Studios come about?
Again, another long story. So I showed up at 501 South Buena Vista Street in Burbank. That's where the studio is and where Disney's headquarters are. And showed up and said, "Hi, I'm here from Akron, Ohio. I'm an accountant who wants to be a creative guy." I said, "Get out of here, kid. It's the last thing we want. Besides, we have a hiring freeze for the year of 1976, which it was." So I left. Next day I came back again, and they said, "Get out of here, kid," nicely. And the next day I came back again. "Get out of here, kid." And I came back again, over and over and over. And one of the reasons, which I shared with students the other night, was before I left, I think when I verbalize. So I always share things that are just in my thoughts, noise the heck out of a lot of people. And I was at a family gathering of a whole bunch of people, maybe 50 or 60 people. And my Aunt Pat hears me telling somebody, "I'm going to go work for Walt Disney." And she yells out across the crowd, "You got a job at Walt Disney." In those days, Disney was the apex of creativity in the world. Now there's creativity right here in Akron that
Right.
is amazing. But she said, they can hire anybody in the world. Why in God's name would they hire you? Well, that was even more motivational for me than Mike Vance's talk about Walt Disney. So I was going to get a job. I was not coming back to Akron and facing my Aunt Pat and all my relatives without doing it. And that actually, believe it or not, there were a lot of discouraging times in the 4 months it took me before I landed on the doorstep till they hired me. One being we ran out of money. We didn't have any. And but Aunt Pat's words were just in my head. And by the way, parenthetically, and this is something we talked about the other night, it's very important at some shift in our career, and I think graduating seniors especially from college, that they take all the other voices out of their life and find their own voice. And so Aunt Pat helped me do that. And I realized there are people who give you advice that is actually, they don't understand who you really are. And so anyway, I got this idea partially because I ran out of money, and we were begging for food from any friends we made by that time. And give me a job at Disneyland, make it the worst job. And so they did, because they didn't want me coming back to the studio every day. And Disneyland's 35 miles away down in Anaheim. And they thought, that'll get rid of this kid because he's annoying as all get out. So down to Disneyland I go. I work on the Skyway ride, which are these buckets that you put people in, long gone because for a lot of reasons. And you have to stop these 2,000-pound buckets as they come in off the cable and let people out. But in those days, they took tickets at Disneyland for each of the rides. And so my favorite thing in the rotation of what you did on the ride was taking tickets. And this is all related to how I got a career at Walt Disney. And so I loved it when families came up and there were young children. I would always get down to one knee. I was totally in the spirit of Disneyland. And I'd get down on one knee and I'd look the children in the eye and I'd say, "Are you having a nice time today, Bobby?" And Bobby would look up at parents and say, "How do you know my name?" And of course, it's stitched on mouse ears right across.
Right.
So then I would say to the parents, do you want Bobby to have the best time of his life at Disneyland today? And of course they said yes. And so I said, well, there's a ride right over there called Storybook Land. Come just after dark. So stay, don't go home. And just after dark, take Bobby on Storybook Land. It's the most magical thing in that park for children his age. And then I never saw him again. They went off on the ride and they were gone. What I didn't know is I have no idea how many people went from that ride straight to Main Street to Town Hall. And they said, Bill and Fantasyland made this the best time we've ever had here. And at the end of the summer, I was just down there 2 months, earning $2.40 an hour, working maybe 10 hours a week, enough to buy food. And they made, it was a hiring freeze that year, but they made one job offer for a permanent position at Disneyland out of 6,000 temporary employees, of which I was one. And that was me. Shocked the heck out of me. And as I told the other night, I turned it down because that very same day I got that offer, I got an offer up at the studio for marketing assistant for the division of Disney that ultimately launched the Disney Channel and Disney Home Video. And my career was launched, and that fueled everything that's happened since.
So you were involved in launching Disney Home Video and the Disney Channel. What was that experience like personally?
Well, and I always have to emphasize this because I don't like people who, make themselves larger than life, right? I was a bit player in a very large cog. For me, the first was Disney Home Video. And Disney Home Video was a great experience. Ben Ten was the fellow who ran it. I was head of creative services at the time. Ben was one of my clients. And so I was involved in the whole launch, and my team developed all the packaging that ultimately became Disney Home Video in all the stores. And I think our designs lasted for probably 20, 25 years. Brought in outside design firms to help. And so and that was my first time doing something like that. And it was a great experience. And I really loved it. Disney Channel was very interesting. This happened just about 6 years after I walked out of graduation here in Akron as an accountant who didn't know where in the world to point myself. So, by the way, I apologize if I'm looking all over. When I think, I always look at the sky.
No worries,
It's just
no worries.
a strange thing. I didn't have any idea. And 6 years later, I was in front of the chairman of the board of Disney and the president of Disney and the executive producer and the head of motion picture development. And my team was presenting all the original story ideas for the Disney Channel, the purpose of which was to go to New York and do a deal with Group W, be 50-50 partner with Disney. And it was very successful. It was wonderful to be in the boardroom and to interact with all these executives. And again, I'm 29 years old at the time, 28 years old. Well, no, maybe even younger than that. And it's just this amazing experience. And I didn't know anything about developing story ideas. This was all for presentation. Some of the things that we came up with, ultimately, the concept of them ultimately became productions years later. So that kind of cracked me up. I doubt it was from what we did, but it's just fun. And it's just wonderful to journey in a way that takes you into all these adventures. So.
What were some of the big key takeaways from working in the kind of environment that early in your career?
Good and bad. I had this idea, and we talked about this the other night with a group of students. I had this idea that the people who run these giant places are there because inherently they're giant intellects, or they're something other than me. They're more godly, right? They always were going to be there. But I realized they're just people like you and like me who were ambitious. And now the people that were there built Disney with Walt. So this was a very long time ago. This was before Eisner came in and take over of Disney. And it was a wonderful philosophical company. But the biggest revelation for me is it's a great adventure. It's a great learning experience. I'm a cog in a very large wheel. And I want to be Walt Disney, not work for a Walt Disney company.
Right.
Now, I never became a Walt Disney, but it became this concept. So two learnings. One is ordinary people who have intellect, ambition, and also strong, good moral ethics are the people who have grown to these large positions. And that became a door opener for me because I suddenly realized, okay, I'm just on a journey. And all that thing that young people tell themselves, which is, who am I to do that? Who am I to make that suggestion? Well, you're just like the famous people all the way up there, identical to them. So that was just a giant revelation in that, okay, I don't know a lot, but I'm on a journey and I can get to a place where I'm doing some amazing things. And that was a big deal, given that I came from Akron and everybody told me, well, you're just from Akron. Akron's a great place. It's a wonderful place to grow up for so many reasons. But we all need to go through this thing where we become ourselves rather than we become what other people tell us we should become.
Absolutely.
So those were, and I have a whole bunch of lessons. We have a Zoom coming up with the students who heard the thing the other night to continue the conversation, because there's probably about 50 life-changing lessons along that journey.
You eventually made the move to Seattle and co-founded Christensen and Fritsch. That's a big shift from working at a major studio to building your own firm. What led to that decision?
Well, it started with, I want to be Walt Disney, not work for Walt Disney. Um, my perception is I'm a kind and nice person, right? Outsiders' perception is I'm a driven human being. And that manifested itself around this time. When I left Disney, I took a job at a small advertising agency of 9 people in Seattle. My primary reason for taking is they're going to pay for my move to Seattle. I'm going to get to meet with a lot of clients, and I'll probably take a job with one of those clients, because I heard advertising is a horrible field and unstable. Well, I got there and I realized this was a fabulous firm. Though small, their attraction of talent was monumental. And many people who came to that firm went on to nationally prominent positions in major advertising agency groups and creative organizations. Paul Matthias came from there, and he founded Digital Kitchen, which became extremely famous and one of the top creative firms in the world, arguably, of course. And so now I've lost the thought entirely.
What was your approach to growing a new agency?
Oh, yes. So why Christensen and Fritsch? Well, when I left Disney, I want to be a Walt Disney. I have a really hard time when I work for people who tell me what to do. And the reason is not that I don't pitch in and help. I do when I'm told. I still do. And but if what I'm told to do doesn't solve the problem we're trying to solve, I don't do what I'm told to do. And I got in a lot of trouble about it. And I illustrated a story with home video the other night with students where I got in a lot of trouble because I exceeded what I was told to do. And so I just realized I'm just not the kind of person I'm not insecure. I have a very stable home life. I met my sweetie at age 17. I was 19 when we got married. We're about to celebrate our 54th anniversary. I have so much stability and love at home. I've been able to be crazy and do crazy things, crazy by other people's standards. So Christensen and Fritsch, so I worked for this little ad agency, and I realized I love working with clients and opening up their minds about what could be done, and then working with creative people and inspiring them to reach further into themselves to create wonderful concepts. And I was very bold in convincing clients they should do some bold things, because inherently most businesses don't want to do bold things because people are afraid, I might get in trouble, right?
Right.
So I started Christensen and Fritsch. Ron Christensen was my partner, wonderful human being, still my best friend on earth. And I love that man. And we used to say, well, you catch him, I'll clean him. So he caught him, I cleaned him. So he went out. He was just a gregarious human being. He when people said no to him, he got to work. And our vision was, we're going to, as opposed to let's go out and be the little engine that could get 50 small assignments, we said we're going to have 5 mega clients. And in 5 years, we will sell this organization. That was day one vision. So 5 clients, 150 million in billings, which in those days was a lot of money, still is a lot of money. And 4 years later, we were, close to 100 people. We had 5 clients. And we sold to Foot Cone and Belding, and an inspired man, Jack Belusic, who took FCB West from 80 people to 800 in 4 years, with some of the most inspired work in America. And he became my boss. So he pushed me even further to get crazy about what I did with my life. The year following the sale, we tripled in business. And we were the most profitable agency worldwide, percentage-wise, in the world for the FCB network. It was called True North. They renamed it to True North. Long ago, merged into even bigger things. And but it was such a wonderful experience because it taught me, and I'm applying it right now with a company called Newton Street, newtonstreet.com, and we can talk about it maybe. And it is, don't start by just jumping in and saying, let's go get something. Start by asking yourself, what do I want to be in 5 years? And envision it and play with it and draw pictures around it, or take things and put them on a board of some kind that is your life in 5 years, your business life, your home life. Who are your friends? What do I dress like? And just enjoy imagining, and then decide what are the philosophies that drive every decision we make from this point for this company. And we had 5 key philosophies. We don't need to go into those necessarily, but they guided every decision. We also, before we had a single client, we imagined what our organization looked like 5 years hence when we had all these clients. So every person we hired with the thought, can they lead a group of people? Not can they do the tasks at hand? And we grew like a rocket ship, and it was a gargantuan success. And it was, for a moment, I was Walt Disney in my tiny little way. And the fulfillment, the stress is real high when you run an enterprise. You're an entrepreneur. There's a lot of stress in managing cash flow, helping people resolve problems can be difficult. And so during the whole journey of it, it was just go, go, go. It was after it was all done, after we sold it in year 5, I ran it. I was head of it for 5 more years and had great partners in it. We brought more partners than Ron. We're all great friends to this day, which is unusual in close working relationships. And the joy I have now looking back on it is just immense, because it was an accomplishment, and it wasn't my accomplishment. It was an accomplishment of all these wonderful people that got attracted to this magnetic vision for where we're going to go to the future.
Later on, you stepped into the leadership role at Digital Kitchen and helped transform the agency in a big way. What were your first impressions of the agency when you joined?
So I love Digital Kitchen with all my heart. It was arguably, when I arrived, I didn't cause this. It was arguably, when I arrived, one of the most creative firms in the world. And it was founded by Paul Matthias, who I interacted with back at this little ad agency when I came to Seattle. Paul was an art director in those days, and the most visually acute person I've ever known. Everything he did was absolutely infused with magic. And so when when desktop publishing, the term 100 years ago, came about and computers came into create a part of the creativity, Paul recognized that it is the moving picture, it's video that's going to dominate that whole field. And so he founded Digital Kitchen on the premise that we're going to do the world's most visually beautiful work in video. And along his journey, he went down to Hollywood. He met with HBO and a producer named Alan Ball. And he convinced Alan Ball to put some money into developing a sequence before the show started, which they didn't do in those days. In those days, a long time ago, the directors or producers of the show, which is just freeze frame the main characters, starring James Garner, holding a gun. That was it, right? Paul said, if we can create a metaphor that's visually beautiful and touches people's hearts, I'll prove to you we can expand the audience for the shows. So Alan Ball gave him a chance. They did a show called 6 Feet Under. They didn't have the technology in those days to do what Paul wanted to do, so they went to Adobe and got Adobe to write new code for Photoshop so they could take type and break it into pieces. And the show 6 Feet Under was about undertakers and the metaphor of life and death. Well, it was so successful, Alan Ball did a 30-minute special, And the 30-minute special was the making of the main title, because nobody had ever done that in Hollywood. And that 30-minute special made Digital Kitchen famous. And 400 shows later, every one of you would recognize every single opening sequence. Digital Kitchen was the king of what started that business, and it became the king of it. The problem is it's really hard to make money in Hollywood. It sounds like a lot of fun, but it can be a very stress-filled place to work. A lot of artists, a lot of opinions, and so forth. And the main thing is they couldn't make money. So Paul got this idea of, okay, we took branding to entertainment. What happens if we take entertainment to branding? So they started going out to major corporations and creating main titles like 1600, Dexter, True Blood, 400 shows later. And all of a sudden, companies throughout the world were starting to interact with Digital Kitchen. The big thing in those days was there were advertising agencies, famous advertising agencies started calling Digital Kitchen, like Budweiser, agency handling Budweiser, beer slammed on a bar and out foam comes a crown. That was all Digital Kitchen. They had 80% of the worldwide VFX, visual effects in the advertising industry in those days. They were the king. And but once they started going client direct, advertising agencies started withholding some of that work. And when I got there, we were mostly doing phenomenal work for giant corporations.
Oh, what did success look like for you as a CEO?
Well, the job there, the problem was the biggest client for Digital Kitchen when I got there, and that's about the time Vanya invited me, and I started giving talks here at the University of Akron, and I've done for more than the last decade. The biggest challenge was they took on an assignment to build AT&T streaming service called Uverse, and Digital Kitchen got into the television production business and show production, and AT&T was a majority of the business of Digital Kitchen. So I walked in, and they paid slow. So even if you're running a creative enterprise, you better master business ideas, and the biggest one being cash flow. If you have to pay your payroll today, but the client doesn't pay you for a vast amount of work in 60 days, and you don't have the cash for it, that can be challenging. And they were in that zone where it became so big so fast, they stopped their growth rate, and the cash flow got worse and worse. The week I got there, I flew to our Chicago office, and I met with Chase Bank and said, I want to triple our line of credit. Now, a line of credit, for those of your viewers that don't know, allows a company to borrow against what companies owe us. So even though AT&T would owe us, $2.5 million, we could borrow against that. So I visited with Chase Bank, and it's outlined plan and vision for the future to rapidly grow the business and diversify the big business base, so we didn't have so much risk with AT&T if it ever went away. So the bank said, "Oh, this is great, Bill. This is wonderful." And 1 week later, our receptionist in the Chicago office got a call from someone at Chase Bank saying, "We're taking away your line of credit." They didn't call me. They didn't look me in the eye. They called and left the message with the receptionist. And that really cheesed me. I thought that was really low life. And and I do business with Chase. It's a good bank, but whoever that person was, I would not hire, that's for sure. So I was up a creek without a paddle as a new CEO. And the second thing that happened week following that is AT&T changed their payment terms another 2 weeks out. That required another $700,000 of operating capital. So none of the employees ever knew this, because I don't believe it's a role of the CEO to walk around with a cloud around their head. especially in a creative environment. I'm walking around saying, things are great. We're going here. They never knew how we had to scratch for a lot of payrolls to get money's in. And I started factoring receivables, and factoring is where you go to quasi loan sharks. And so we paid a lot of interest to meet our payrolls. Now, we were profitable as a business. It just was a cash flow issue. So that's what I was confronted with right away. And my job was to groom the company, demonstrate that we can grow, and bring capital in or sell the enterprise, which we ultimately did to a company called KYU. It was backed by the second largest agency group in Japan, Hakuhodo. And Michael Birkin was the visionary at Q, and he bought Digital Kitchen, and he bought IDEO and very famous creative firms. And that man is a visionary. And I always loved Michael Birkin.
You've also worked closely with founders and startups as a mentor and an advisor. What draws you to this kind of work?
Well, I just love being around creative people. And I live on an island now, and my neighbors are eagles and all kinds of birds and sea lions. And it's a wonderful life. And I love it a lot. But when I was a boy, I had this idea that old people, my grandparents were always old. They were just old people. And I didn't realize they were young people that just grew wrinkled, and they still, as old people, they're still, the young person resides in there. I'm going to live to be 105. My head tells me. I don't know if that's practical or not. It's a fun idea if I'm healthy. And so I'm going to keep my mind active. And my best way is working with people who light rooms when they walk in the rooms. They just bring positive energy. And we need it so much right now in this society where negativity rules. And I shared a thought with the students the other night. You become what you think, and be very careful what you put into your brain. So interacting with founders of startups who have these dreams in mind it's so enjoyable. It's all positive energy. And I'm an empathetic person. I take on people's feelings that they're feeling. And if I'm around negative people, it depresses me deeply. And I just don't do it. I just won't do it, except occasionally. You have to. So I'll give you an example. And this is a company called Newton Street. So now Newton Street is a company that has two founders, 50-50 owners of Newton Street. Both of them work for the Gates Foundation. One of those partners is my daughter, Amy. The other partner is Karen Lowry Miller. And Amy was working for the Gates Foundation for 15 years. She ran worldwide media relations. And in that role, she interacted with Bill and Melinda a lot. And she was very successful at it. But Bill Gates is the world's greatest giver. In fact, I just read today, he's now given 20 years to give away his entire fortune. 99% of what he ever earned is he's giving back to the world. And so they're accelerating what the Gates Foundation is doing right now. So he's one of the world's most wonderful human beings, but he's also a driven man. If you work for Bill Gates, you have to be really exceptional. And that can be very stressful because my daughter had two young children, and balancing working for Bill Gates and traveling around the world with being a great mom, and can be very stressful. So I encouraged her, hang out a shingle. You have enough experience after 15 years of the Gates Foundation. And she did. And she immediately got clients and became even busier than before. And so but one of the freelancers she was working with was Karen Lowry Miller, who also came from the Gates Foundation. And when I met Karen, I realized you put those two women together, So brilliant intellects known throughout the world in their circles. And they light rooms. No public relations firm that competes with them will ever beat them if they want the business, right? So they came together January 1st of 2024, a year and a quarter ago. And first thing was drop all your freelance clients and keep this one assignment. Today, just 15 months later, they have major business under contract for long-term contract. At the beginning of January 1st, they had the revenues set for the entire year, which I've never seen in the communications industry in 50 years of doing this stuff. So why did that happen? And there's some philosophies that go with that. And that's how I contribute. So before we go off half-cocked, let's imagine what we want to be 5 years hence. Let's set our goals. Let's imagine the organization, and let's imagine what clients we want to serve. And most people in the creative industry or the communication industry, they're like, oh, we got to get business, and anybody who has money, go get them. Baloney. I call that the hamster wheel, because if you get a broad collection of clients in a broad collection of things, you're a specialist in nothing. If you're in a business like Newton Street, they're advocates. They only serve foundations that have billions of dollars. They're trying to solve global climate change. And the reason they're going after foundations with billions of dollars is we can't wait to start solving climate change. Somebody better change the world's opinions of these leaders who say climate change isn't real. And they are the counterpoint and bring facts and information. And so they're advocates, and they also provide access to the world's most elite media, those who really know what they're doing. So that's how focused they are. So they're global women's health, global climate change, promotion of democracy. That's their specialty. And I'm going to brag, they're the best in the world at it. And we're already seeing evidence of that. And financially, they're an astounding success. I've never seen it before. Now, I'm really happy because especially Amy is my daughter.
What's a common pattern you see with early stage businesses?
We just talked about one. Okay, we've got together. We only have 3 nickels to rub together. This is all we can do. Okay, mistake number 1. Why? Because you're going out in a competitive marketplace where people can choose anyone they want to do business with. So you can't have the mindset, this is all I have, I'll do the best with it. You have to step back, number 1, and ask, what do I need to do to be the best at this thing I'm doing? And what kind of resources do I need to gather to do it? And that's the only way to succeed. I say this thing when I give talks that in my view, it's easier to succeed than it is to fail. Failing is really hard. 95% of new startups fail. And it's for the very reason we just talked about. They're going into a competitive world. They don't have the assets they need. And they're not innovative enough to get those assets. And so, and Christensen and Fritsch, can I illustrate a point in that, Jaden?
Yeah.
Christensen and Fritsch, when we first started in, I had my savings. Ron Christensen had his. We had no working capital. And I put off starting a company because I thought I first have to save up $300,000. Then I can start a business. So I heard this motivational speaker, a guy named Lou Tice. Now, again, this is 180 years ago. I'm an old guy. And Lou Tice, he had a key to a door that I needed to have unlocked. And he said, if you are starting a business and you have linear thoughts. I go from this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I'll start being able to get resources to do what I want. You're already doomed to failure because you're misunderstanding how the world works. So he said, and I did this. He said, imagine what your life is like, including your business 5 years hence, and stick it on your mirror. In those days, we didn't have social media. We didn't have phones. We didn't have we didn't have a lot of stuff you have now. So pull pictures out of magazines, stick it on your mirror, and as you're shaving in the morning or doing your hair, look at those pictures and replace them and imagine the life to be. So one section is your business. And so if you do that and you suddenly get a vision for what it could be, and you start sharing it with anyone that will listen, the world will bring the resources to your door. So I heard that and I quit the little ad agency but the little ad agency was now big because during my era, we grew leaps and bounds because it was such a fabulous agency. I bought them 2 years later, by the way, after we started Christians for Fritsch, or 3 or 4 years later. So wonderful firm. And but this idea of imagine became the ticket for me. So I quit the next day. We didn't have the resources. Immediately went out, looked at signing $300,000 leases, didn't have any clients. All we had was the ability to go without a paycheck for up to 2 years, each of us. And we said, okay, we'll spend our savings down to zero if we need to. That was it. And so, but we're going to go do it. And I hired a publicist, paid them $5,000, a lot of money in those days, to say, tell Seattle business what we're doing. And the publicist did the Lou Tice thing, which is spread the word of your vision. I got a call from a guy named Ron Elgin, who ran the biggest advertising agency in Seattle, Elgin Seifert, which was huge and so well run. He said, skip that entrepreneur stuff. That's stressful. Just come work for me and I'll make you rich and do what you're going to do. And we said, well, thank you, Ron. That was a really nice offer, but no way, Jose. We've now made this decision. Off we go. He said, okay, come back tomorrow and tell me how I can help you. So I'm thinking, I want to sign a $300,000 lease. And this guy has 2 extra floors in a building he's responsible for that aren't filled up yet. So I came back, Ron and I came back and met with Ron Elgin and said, give us free space for a year in this beautiful environment so we look like we're successful, and personally sign a line of credit guarantee because we didn't have the credit. And we'll only be able to borrow if we go out and get business and have a receivable. And Ron did it. And he and his partner, Dave, got 16% of our enterprise for that act. Never cost them a dime. And they made tremendous amount of money in the end. And we celebrate, we relished writing those checks because that propelled our start. The universe will provide if you have a compelling vision and you share it well.
You also give back through education. Why is sharing your story and stuff with students so important to you?
I've got 4 granddaughters, Tilly, Emily, Penny, and Elle. And 2 are 11, 2 are 8. So I have 2 daughters, 4 granddaughters. I want them to be everything that they can be. And I feel the same way about you. And I feel the same way about this university, which gave me my start. I'm great friends with now Vanya, Dr. Jurek, who I just admire so much. And Mike Vance put a key into a door that I needed to have unlocked. And Lou Tice put a key into a door that had to be unlocked for each of these chapters. My turn to provide a key to a door that maybe unlock something for you or these other students. There's no greater joy than I have. Well, equal joys than coming here and doing that and sharing with people. And it energizes me, and I get a lot out of it.
For students and young creatives tuning in, what advice would you give to them trying to start building their careers?
Oh my Lord. So go back 50 years. I graduated this week 52 years ago from this university. So I am truly a dinosaur. And in those days, creativity had to be housed in places that had, there were creative environments, and there were many of them, ad agencies, Walt Disney, and so forth. Today, oh my Lord, my granddaughters can do things on their iPads that I couldn't imagine doing. At 8 and 11, they are creators. And I'm watching these young people who build 50 million person followers online. This is the age of creativity and creative entrepreneurism. And I think if you can take the mental blocks out that say, well, who am I to do that, right? Of course it's you who should do that. Dream and do it. And, people get it wrong. We're told that by our parents, by our relatives, by our going through school and high school, and sometimes college, that you have to get out there and work and you don't make mistakes, right? Baloney. Make mistakes. Economic failure is not a tragedy. You don't get thrown into debtor's prison. Your hands aren't chopped off. It's an inconvenience. And people don't understand that. Economic failure on the part of an attempt to try something big is sometimes the consequence of trying things big. Walt Disney, he went bankrupt a couple times, and he kept pushing and pushing. And oh my God, read the biography of Walt Disney by Bob Thomas or Neil Gabler. It will surprise all of you. It's an inspiration about the creative spirit. And so my counsel to creatives is get rid of the little voice or the angel devil on your shoulder that speaks to you. I had it. And I had literally a little voice that kind of said, Bill, who are you to do that? And early in my career, I'd missed some really big opportunities because I kind of had some kid from Akron. And yeah, but you know what? Kids everywhere kind of made the same. Greatness comes from every city in the world. And inspiration, if it's in your heart, follow it. Can I tell one more story in that, Jaden?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always close my talks about a story of my grandpa Crawford. Grandpa Crawford died at my age, and he died of cancer. And he'd been in the hospital, and they had real challenges curing cancer in those days or mitigating it. And so by month, he got weaker and weaker. And I'd visit him. He'd say, when I get out, I'm going to take grandma out and do this. And when I get out, I'm going to write a book about my exploits in World War I, which he fought as a 16-year-old, because he said he was 18. And when I get out, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And one day I visit him, and he is half his stature. He's just leaning over in his chair. Hey, Grandpa, and what are you going to do when you get out? And he said, I'm not getting out. I'm at the end of the road. And I said, oh, come on. You're going to do it. He said, shut up and you listen to me. I'm at my deathbed. And he said, as I sit here and I look back, I see the road clearly that I came on. When I started, we don't know the road. It's a mystery. It's an unknown future. And I see 3 other roads in my life. I'm very specific on what they were. And I'm sitting here at my deathbed wishing to God I'd taken the other road. I let my head and checkbook make my decisions. And he said, my heart didn't make the decisions. He said, now you're going to know when one of those branches on your road come, because you make mistakes along the way, you have new job offers, you're going to know. He said, take the other road. And he died 2 days later. I have had that thought in every decision I've ever made that's monumental. And I came to this conclusion: life is lived in chapters. And who knows? Few people know at your age. How old are you? Well,
I'm 19. I turned 20 in a couple of
weeks. Oh my goodness, that's such a great age. You can't really know what you're going to be when you're out at my age, which is 73. And you just can't know. And so you're going to make some decisions along the way that maybe you shouldn't make. And by the way, you can learn more by the mistakes than the good decisions you make, as long as you look at them and acknowledge them and share them and talk about them, as opposed to hide them and go, we can't make mistakes, I'll get fired, right? And you're going to know when you come to one of those roads. And his counsel was, let your heart go. And the reason is there's a real you inside you. But maybe at your age, if I were you, or you were me way back when, I had other people's voices in my head guiding my decisions. And it wasn't through some parts of the journey that I figured out who I was. So my counsel always is, really work hard on just understanding the things that motivate you. And if your parents had said, I know you want to be an artist, but you really need to be an engineer, put it out of your mind. You're grown up now. You're coming out of college. Get rid of those thoughts. You follow your own heart and create a destiny, and take the other road and live your life in chapters and have adventures, but ever pursue happiness and fulfillment a little closer and a little closer. And fulfillment doesn't come from money. Money just relieves stress in life. And never mistake that money is what my pursuit is. It's happiness.
Very well said. Thanks again for watching another episode of the Taylor Blueprint. Thank you to Bill for sharing your insight and stuff with the students. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you very soon. Be sure to follow us on the U Akron Marketing Instagram and, of course, the Taylor Institute. Thanks for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.